moment Tom Bower said it, something shifted deep inside the palace walls. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Like a clock that had just started ticking. And no one outside was supposed to hear it. Because according to whispers swirling through royal corridors, the countdown is no longer theoretical, no longer emotional, and no longer avoidable. It has begun. Not publicly, not officially. But
breaking right now, new calls for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to have their titles stripped as well.
To tell the truth, I spoke to very few friends of Meghan because she put a fatwa on anyone talking to me.
It's Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lily too. And he wants his father to be tougher.
Unmistakably. The kind of countdown that doesn't announce itself with trumpets, but with silence, distance, and decisions made behind closed doors that only a few insiders truly understand. It wasn't just another comment from another royal watcher trying to stay relevant. Tom Bower doesn't speak lightly. He doesn't speculate casually.
King Charles has bestowed upon his son and his...
He observes, he waits, and when he speaks, it's usually because he knows something others don't. And when he revealed that the future of Harry and Meghan's titles could look very different once William takes the throne, it sent a wave of unease through both sides of the Atlantic. Because suddenly, this wasn't about feelings anymore. It wasn't about family arguments or emotional wounds. It was about
stripping his younger brother of his royal titles last month. The former Prince Andrew remains in the formal line of success.
Power, structure, legacy, and survival of the monarchy itself. And Harry knows it. He's been watching closely, quietly, carefully, because he's already seen what happens when the palace decides someone no longer fits into the picture. He saw it happen to Andrew. He saw how quickly decades of privilege, authority, and royal protection could evaporate when the institution decided enough was enough.
In the interest of national dignity, and in accordance with the Crown's duty to the next...
One day, Andrew was surrounded by ceremonial honors, royal residences, and unquestioned status. The next, he was stripped of his public identity piece by piece, reduced to a shadow of the man he once was. That transformation wasn't just humiliating. It was a warning, a blueprint, a message written in silence.
What about Meghan and Harry? Because there are reports that Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and their children
And Harry understood it more clearly than anyone else. Because unlike Andrew, Harry didn't just fall out of favor, he walked away. He chose distance. He chose independence. He chose to build a life far from the monarchy's reach. But what he may not have realized at the time was that the monarchy never stops watching. Because King Charles, for all his authority, has
on the toes of the monarch is nothing new. It's actually textbook royal behavior. That's why it's
always been different. He hesitates. He reflects. He seeks peace instead of confrontation. He prefers slow adjustments over explosive decisions. Even when tensions escalated beyond repair, he allowed time to soften the edges of conflict. He allowed space for reconciliation, even when reconciliation seemed impossible. Charles doesn't want war. He doesn't want to be remembered as the king who punished his own son. He wants stability, harmony, a peaceful reign after decades of waiting in the shadows. And that hesitation, that emotional restraint, is the only thing that has
their downfall as the exact blueprint to strip the Sussexes of their royal titles once and for all, and sources say there's no turning back.
Kept the countdown from reaching zero. But William is different. William doesn't hesitate. William doesn't wait. William doesn't forgive easily when he believes the institution itself has been threatened. Because William grew up not just as a prince, but as a witness. He watched the chaos. He watched the scandals. He watched his grandmother carry the burden of protecting something bigger than family, protecting an idea that had survived for centuries. And he absorbed every lesson she taught without ever saying a word.
You're a symbolic figurehead and not a political individual, so I already feel like this poll is a sham.
William understands something Charles never fully embraced, that the monarchy cannot afford emotional weakness. It cannot afford public contradictions. It cannot afford uncertainty about who represents it and who does not. Because once doubt creeps in, the entire structure begins to crack. And William is thinking about the future, not the past. He's thinking about George, Charlotte, Louis. He's thinking about the day they inherit a crown that must remain respected, unquestioned, and intact. He's thinking about protecting them from chaos before chaos has a chance to reach them. And that's why the countdown matters. Because this isn't about revenge. It's about control. It's about ensuring that when William becomes king, there are no loose ends, no contradictions, no royal titles attached to individuals operating entirely outside royal authority. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in California, Harry appears relaxed, detached, even carefree, surfing, smiling, living a life that feels worlds away from palace politics. But appearances can deceive. Because beneath that surface, questions are growing louder, doubts are becoming harder to ignore, the public is watching more closely now, analyzing every move, every statement, every image, and when people begin questioning authenticity, they begin questioning everything. The perception of privilege, the perception of detachment, the perception that Harry and Meghan still carry royal titles while operating as independent commercial figures, it's creating a contradiction the monarchy cannot ignore forever. And that contradiction is exactly why Tom Bower's revelation feels so dangerous. Because the countdown doesn't need a dramatic announcement to be real. It only needs intention. It only needs preparation. It only needs the right moment. And once William ascends the throne, that moment may arrive faster than anyone expects. Because the monarchy has always operated on one simple rule: survival above sentiment. And if survival requires sacrifice, even family can become expendable. What makes this countdown even more chilling is that it isn't driven by anger alone, it's driven by inevitability, by a growing realization inside palace walls that Harry and Meghan's existence outside the royal machine while still holding royal titles creates a paradox the institution cannot tolerate forever. Because titles were never meant to be decorative ornaments worn without responsibility. They were symbols of service, obedience, and alignment with the crown's authority. And when those symbols remain attached to individuals building independent empires, commercial brands, and global media ventures, it creates something the monarchy fears more than scandal itself: loss of control. And that loss of control has become impossible to ignore as public perception continues to shift, especially when carefully curated images meant to reinforce credibility begin to unravel under scrutiny, revealing cracks that critics seize upon immediately. Because authenticity is the one currency the monarchy cannot afford to lose. And every time Harry and Meghan present themselves as royal figures while simultaneously distancing themselves from royal responsibility, it deepens the divide between what the titles represent and what their lives have become. And inside Buckingham Palace, that contradiction is no longer viewed as a temporary situation, but as a structural problem that must eventually be resolved, not through emotional confrontation, but through institutional correction. And Tom Bower's words didn't create this countdown, they simply exposed it, revealing what insiders had already begun to accept: that once William becomes king, the emotional restraint that has protected Harry until now may disappear overnight, replaced by a colder, more pragmatic calculation, focused entirely on preserving the monarchy's future. Because William isn't thinking like a brother anymore, he's thinking like a future king whose responsibility is not to protect Harry's feelings, but to protect the crown itself. And from his perspective, the crown cannot afford ambiguity. It cannot afford to allow royal titles to exist outside royal discipline. And it cannot afford to let personal relationships dictate institutional personal decisions. That mindset was shaped by everything William has endured. Every betrayal, every interview, every public revelation that turned private family pain into global spectacle. And while he may never express those emotions publicly, they have quietly hardened into resolve, creating a version of William far different from the boy who once walked beside Harry in shared grief, far different from the brother who once trusted him without question. Meanwhile, Harry remains caught between two worlds, unable to fully return to the one he left behind and unable to fully escape the identity he inherited. Because no matter how far he travels geographically, his titles continue to tether him to an institution he no longer serves, creating a tension that grows more uncomfortable with every passing year, every commercial deal, every public appearance that reinforces his independence while still relying on royal identity for relevance. And that reliance is precisely what makes the countdown feel irreversible, because the monarchy understands that titles hold power not just within palace walls, but across global perception, and allowing those titles to remain indefinitely attached to individuals operating outside royal authority risks diluting their meaning permanently. Inside royal circles, conversations are no longer focused on reconciliation, they're focused on timing, on identifying the moment when removing those titles would cause the least damage to the institution while restoring clarity to its structure, and that moment is widely believed to be tied to William's eventual ascension, because William possesses something Charles never fully embraced: willingness to make irreversible decisions when he believes they are necessary. That willingness has been shaped not by cruelty but by responsibility, by the understanding that monarchy is not sustained by emotion but by discipline, continuity, and authority, and once he becomes king, those priorities will override everything else. The implications of that reality extend far beyond symbolic status, because Harry and Meghan's titles are not just personal honors, they are foundational elements of their global brand, influencing everything from media partnerships to public perception, and losing those titles would fundamentally alter how the world sees them, transforming them from royal figures into private individuals whose influence must stand entirely on its own. And that transformation would not happen gradually, it would happen instantly, with a single decision capable of redefining their identity forever. What makes Tom Bower's revelation so explosive isn't the certainty of when it will happen, but the certainty that preparation has already begun, that the palace has already accepted the possibility, already adjusted its expectations, already imagined a future in which Harry and Meghan no longer carry the titles that once defined them. And once that mental shift occurs inside an institution as rigid as the monarchy, the outcome becomes less a question of if and more a question of when. Because the monarchy does not react impulsively, it evolves deliberately, slowly repositioning itself until the moment arrives when action becomes unavoidable, and by the time that moment arrives, the decision itself feels less like a choice and more like the natural conclusion of a process that began long before anyone outside the palace realized it was happening. And that is the true meaning behind the secret countdown Tom Bower exposed. Not a ticking clock measured in days or months, but a quiet, irreversible progression toward a future in which the monarchy reclaims full control over its identity, its authority, and its legacy. And somewhere between California's sunlit beaches and Buckingham Palace's shadowed corridors, Harry exists in a state of suspended certainty, aware that his titles remain intact today but uncertain whether they will survive tomorrow, aware that the brother he once trusted implicitly may soon become the king who must decide his fate, aware that the countdown has already begun even if no one has announced it publicly, and aware that once it reaches its final moment, there will be no negotiation, no reversal, and no way back to the life he left behind.